Zionism was founded as a nationalist, anti-religious movement. Not only anti-religious, specifically anti-Jewish movement. They treated the Jews of Europe, the religious Jews of Europe, with the greatest contempt, in the most racist way. Now, the thing is that Zionism is a nationalistic movement that uses and abuses Judaism to gain legitimacy. And the ultra-Orthodox Jews, most of them, many of them are non-Zionists, some of them are staunch anti-Zionists, and there are a few who are Zionists, it's true. They didn't exist before the foundation of the State of Israel, but there are today a few who are Zionist. The ultra-Orthodox, they see Zionism as the greatest threat to Judaism, the greatest threat to them. And they say that even the name Israel was stolen from them. Everything was stolen from them, and Israel claims to speak on their behalf, which is one big lie. Now, Israel is definitely not a democratic state, but it's also not a Jewish state. Israel is only Jewish in the same way that South Africa was white. It is not Jewish by religion. It is only Jewish by supremacy, by ethnicity. Now, when you talk about, there's so many arguments why Israel is not Jewish, but if you look at the numbers, for example, first of all, most Jews don't live in Israel. They live abroad. Secondly, those who live in Israel, most of them are secular, they're not religious. Most of the people who live in historic Palestine at the moment, not even counting the refugees, you have about 50-50 now between Jews and non-Jews on that land. So Israel cannot claim to be Jewish in any way. And besides, it is also not Jewish in the religious sense. They are making up something else. Basically, the religious Jews, for them, it's not a question, what is a Jew? It's someone who follows their religious practice. But for the Zionist Jews, since their identity is so flawed, then for them, they cannot define what does it mean to be Jewish. And they always fall into this trap over and over again whenever they have to define it. But for them, because they cannot define for themselves what does it mean to be Jewish, then their definition is pretty much, if the other people hate us, then we're Jewish. And that's why they go on and on ranting about anti-Semitism and so on. Actually, the greatest anti-Semitic force in the world today is the State of Israel. Israel recognizes 4 different nationalities for its own citizens. There's Jewish, Arab, Circassian, and Druze, which are 2 other minorities, not nationalities. Now, this was taken to the Supreme Court of Israel. The Supreme Court is the main vehicle of apartheid. Some people think that it is the army or another institution, but actually it is the Supreme Court that is mainly legitimizing the illegitimate. But those Israeli Jews, they felt that they didn't feel comfortable with being identified as Jewish. They said, we're Israeli, we want to be identified as such, and they took this to the Supreme Court. After much deliberation, the court said that they cannot acknowledge having an Israeli nationality because that would undermine the very character of the State of Israel. Now, that is a very true statement coming from that court, because having an Israeli nationality, having some sort of a basis of equality among all the citizens of the state, really undermines everything that the State of Israel is all about, because it is based on everything that is opposed to democratic values, based on everything that is opposed to equality. And actually demanding equality in Israel is probably the most radical thing I can do. There are many myths that have to be dismantled. One of them is this notion that there are such 2 entities called Israel and Palestine living side by side in one way or another. But actually Israel was built on top of Palestine and on account of the indigenous Palestinian people. That's how it was founded. So there is no Israel without Palestine. And the very existence of Israelis is on account of other people. Now, we're not saying that they don't have a right to live there, but no one has a right to live on account of other people. So what needs to happen in order for Israel to become a legitimate entity, it has to acknowledge the rights of the indigenous people, the ones that have been oppressed and subjugated ever since the creation of the State of Israel. And I'm not even referring to the harsh, brutal military occupation of 1967. I'm talking about the occupation of 48, the very foundation of the State of Israel on top of the indigenous people who were living there. The State of Israel was founded on the basis of ethnic cleansing and ethnic segregation. So its first laws were explicitly racist. There are 3 laws that explicitly use the term Jewish in order to give privileges to people of my ethnic background and deny the rights of the others. And there are many more laws. Today we have more than 50 of them that are implicitly racist, that depend on these formal laws. And there are many, many more practices that are racist. But by law, there is discrimination. And that legal type of discrimination against an ethnic or racial group is what falls under the legal definition of the crime of apartheid, as defined in the Rome Statute. So Israel neatly falls under the legal definition of the crime of apartheid, which is a very serious crime under international law. It's one of the few crimes that, along with genocide, that is regarded as a crime against humanity. So that is what we mean when we refer to Israel as an apartheid state. Now, adding to that, the Secret Security Service of Israel, the Shin Bet, stated in court that they are monitoring anyone who is acting against the Jewish character of the state, even if they do it legally. So basically, anyone who is promoting democracy, anyone who is promoting equality in Israel, is being regarded as some sort of a security threat to the state. So what does that tell us about the state? You know this whole peace discourse that we hear? Usually the two-state solution? First of all, it's no solution at all. Definitely not what we are being offered by the Zionists. The Zionists, when they talk about 2 states, basically, they want to have something for the Palestinians in order to justify and maintain that apartheid state that is for the privileged and only for the privileged. And then they will give something to the Palestinians, and even about that they are negotiating and coming up with all kinds of ridiculous demands, as if they can come up with any demands. Israel has exactly and precisely 0 rights over the occupied territories of 67, just like the US has exactly 0 rights over Iraq. It only has obligations to the people living there. But even about Israel in its smaller territory, it will only become legitimate once it acknowledges the rights of those people who have been expelled from there, and it acknowledges equality for the people who are living there. Only then we can talk about peace, or only then we will have peace. So when Israel talks about peace, it is just a way to perpetuate this situation of oppression and subjugation of other people. And it also makes a buck out of it. It also makes a whole lot of profit out of it. Israel was just recently, during the recent massacre of Gaza, it was actually trying out its new weapons, new drones that are now going to be sold to the rest of the world. And they said very clearly that they have introduced premature weapons, premature drones in that case. And during the course of this so-called war, they have matured it and made it marketable. This is partly what it was all about. People have this romantic notion that the change somehow has to come from within. That all of a sudden the apartheid people will just renounce apartheid one day and, you know, everyone will live happily ever after. But it doesn't work that way. The privilege, didn't happen in the past, and I don't think that it will happen this time around, that the privilege will just step off their high horse. But it also doesn't matter. I really don't care what the apartheid people think about apartheid. What matters is how do we end it? And we have a way to end it. We see that nothing has been changing for 6 decades, and Israel was doing whatever it does with full impunity, and everything is changing in the past decade, pretty much since the BDS campaign started. The whole perception of Israel is changing, and also even more than that, we see a whole lot of change happening on the ground. So first of all, we have to end the crimes. Once we end the crimes, then and only then, I will discuss with those people, the privileged people under apartheid, in order to bring about and to build a new society that is based on equality and the rights of minorities, multiculturalism, and so on. But first we need that basis of equality, which we don't have at the moment. The basis today is the exact opposite of equality. So first we have to bring about that basis of equality, and then we can have coexistence. The term that we use today is, rather than coexistence, which is something that will happen in the future, what we are seeking today is co-resistance. The privileged and the underprivileged resisting together against what is happening at the moment. I went to a high school which is a very elitist school, one of the most regarded schools in Israel. And there were also Palestinians studying in that school who are citizens of Israel. During the recent massacre in Gaza, we actually, what's called protective edge, we actually drafted a military refusal letter. We said we are refusing to serve in the army, obviously, but we're also calling on you, the other graduates, the alumni and the students of the school, we're also calling on you to refuse. So we drafted the letter during the recent massacre and we published it just at the end of 2014, marking 6 years to the massacre of 2008. And by doing so, we have also pointed the finger at the whole role of the educational system of Israel, which basically is all about indoctrinating and the manufacturing of obedient soldiers. And we're being trained to be soldiers from kindergarten, literally from kindergarten. When I pick up my niece from her kindergarten, I see that. I see how everything that I come across in the kindergarten is in one way or another is about brainwashing the children in order to, you know, there's a map of Israel, it says like kind of my Israel. So you have the map of Israel, obviously with no borders. You have these very stereotypical images of Bedouins. If you have an image of an Arab person, it would either be Bedouins or camels. And there's the picture of the president, the picture of the chief of staff, the flag, of course, you know, everything, all these different kind of symbols in order to brainwash the minds of little children. And such children, they grow up with this type of thinking that without even acknowledging that they live there on account of other people, and actually they are being told that the main role of an Israeli citizen is to basically to serve and protect the country. So we have a group of conscientious Israelis who support the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. In analogy to what happened in South Africa at the time, where you had a few white people supporting the black people in their just struggle. Now, I think that this is pretty much elementary. It's a no-brainer. We obviously have to support the underprivileged in their struggle. And BDS is really about, it's a liberal mainstream type of discourse. The things that we demand are 3 fundamental rights of the Palestinians, which are protected by international law and human rights conventions. And basically what we demand are the 3 basic values: equality, freedom, and justice. As simple as that. The situation in Gaza is simply beyond description. There's no words to describe how dire the situation is there. And we only have to look back at the massacre that took place there in 2014. One of many massacres. But what is just as troubling is the policy that is being implemented there by the State of Israel, which controls Gaza in every possible way: land, sea, air. Even though they claim that they are no longer occupying Gaza, they are. Absolutely. Now, Israel is responsible for the fact that 95% of the water in Gaza is not fit for human consumption. It is toxic. Now, that is a humanitarian crisis, but it is a politically motivated crisis. Some people sat in an air-conditioned office and decided that this should be the case in Gaza. And the situation is only going to get worse in the coming years. Another example is that the Ministry of Defense in Israel, actually they had to submit it to court at some point, so we have the documents. They have drafted formulas in order to count the caloric intake of the people in Gaza. Now they say that they claim that they never implemented it. Okay, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. The very fact that they drafted such formulas, and they even made amendments to the formulas saying that, well, because of differences of culture, cultural differences, then people in Gaza, they don't need so much fresh fruit and vegetables, they need more white flour and sugar and oil. That is a Nazi type of thinking. But it is not raising an eyebrow in Israel, among Israeli society. Not only the politicians, also the society itself. Unfortunately, in Israel, the government is very much representative of the society. So that has to be challenged. And it is being challenged. Not enough, but it is being challenged. And we're working on it to challenge it even further and bring those who are accountable to justice. President Rivlin said that Israeli society is a sick society. And this is interesting coming from the president of a criminal apartheid state. But he's absolutely right about it. Now, I see Zionism as a form of a mental illness. Now, there were some decent Zionists in the past, before the Zionist project in Palestine, but definitely not since. Because inherently, it is all about racism and supremacy. And just like we will not legitimize any other form of supremacy, no one treats the Ku Klux Klan as something that is legitimate or not sick in its very nature. No one should treat Zionism as any different, or any other supremacist group around the world. So it is even worse than simply being racist, because it is inherently about having, some form of Übermenschen versus Untermenschen, the super beings versus the subhumans. This should not be legitimized. We already discussed the fact that two states is usually being used in order to just perpetuate the situation, perpetuate the crime. But another thing about the discussion about two states, or any discussion, now we are hearing another type of discourse which is called the binational state that they're offering us. All of these revolve around demographics. How many of us versus how many of them. And I'm not willing to speak the game or to play the game of demographics. I don't want demography, I want democracy. And when we talk about one state, I am for less than one state. But the whole discussion about one state doesn't fall into this trap, because when we talk about a single democratic state in historic Palestine, call it by whatever name you want, have whatever flag you wish, or no flag is better. When we talk about one state, we demand equality. We demand that all the people of the land, all the stakeholders will have their rights, including, most importantly, those who have been expelled from there and have the right to come back home if they choose to. Now, it's not up to the Israelis to decide. It is up to them to accept that the situation will change and there will be, sooner or later, equality on this land. And then we actually have to build something together, which is based on all these values that we cherish. And this is why the one-state discourse is important. First of all, because it really challenges the whole type of thinking that's around demography. And secondly, because we're actually offering something for the future. So we are currently sowing the seeds for a brighter future.